Captain Jake Chen had never planned to buy anyone, let alone someone who had been treated so poorly. He was just supposed to refuel his cargo ship, the Starwing, grab some supplies, and get back to his delivery route. But sometimes life has other plans. He had been walking through the market section of Station Omega 7 when he heard the commotion. A trader was shouting at someone, and there was a loud crash of something breaking. Jake's first instinct was to keep walking. He had learned long ago that getting involved in other people's problems usually led to trouble. But then he saw her. The blue-skinned girl was on her hands and knees, trying to clean up pieces of broken glass from what looked like an expensive display case. Her skin was flickering between gray and dark purple, colors that even Jake recognized as distress. The four-armed trader standing over her was clearly furious. "Look what you've done, you worthless creature," Vex was screaming. "That display case costs more than you're worth," which isn't saying much. The girl kept apologizing in a quiet voice, carefully picking up glass pieces, even though they were cutting her fingers. Blue blood dripped onto the floor, but she didn't stop trying to clean up the mess. She just kept saying sorry over and over again. Something about the scene made Jake's chest tighten. The way she accepted the blame. The way she tried so hard to fix something that was clearly an accident. The way she made herself small and invisible while being yelled at. It reminded him of someone. His little sister. Amy had been like that too. Always apologizing for things that weren't her fault. Always trying to fix problems that adults had created. When their parents died in the Mars colony attacks, Amy had somehow convinced herself it was her fault. She was only 12, but she carried guilt that belonged to the terrorists who had destroyed their home. Jake had tried to protect her, tried to give her a normal life on Earth, but the trauma had been too deep. Amy never learned to value herself, never believed she deserved good things. She had died at 19, alone in a hospital room, still apologizing to the nurses for being too much trouble. Now, watching this alien girl apologize for existing, Jake felt that old familiar anger rising in his chest. Not anger at her, but anger at a universe that seemed designed to crush the spirits of innocent people. "Hey!" he called out, surprising himself. "What's going on here?" Vex turned around. His snake-like features twisted with annoyance. "Nothing that concerns you, human. Just dealing with defective merchandise." "Merchandise?" Jake looked at the girl, who was now staring at him with wide, frightened eyes. "She's a person, not merchandise." Vex laughed, a harsh sound like metal scraping against metal. "Person? This thing can't even do the basic functions her species is known for. She's less useful than a broken computer." Jake knelt down next to the girl, ignoring the glass on the floor. Up close, he could see that she was young, probably not much older than Amy had been. Her injuries weren't serious, just small cuts from the glass, but she was shaking. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. She stared at him like she couldn't believe he was talking to her. For a moment, her skin flickered with a tiny spot of yellow surprise, maybe, or confusion. Then it went back to gray. I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to break anything. I was just trying to get out of the way, and I tripped. And it's not your fault," Jake said firmly. "Accidents happen." It's a simple kindness in his voice seemed to shock her more than Vex's anger had. She looked at him like he was speaking a foreign language. That's when Jake made his decision. He stood up and faced the traders. How much for her? The negotiation that followed was brief and brutal. Jake had expected to pay a lot more than 20 credits. But the traders were so eager to get rid of Zara that they practically paid him to take her. Within minutes, he found himself holding ownership papers for another human being, feeling sick to his stomach. The girl Zara, according to the papers, followed him to his ship without saying a word. She walked 3 steps behind him, head down, like she was afraid of taking up too much space. When they reached the Starwing, she stopped at the bottom of the loading ramp. What do you want me to do?" she asked quietly. Jake realized she was waiting for orders. The thought made him angry all over again, but he kept his voice calm. "Come inside. We need to talk." His ship wasn't fancy, but it was home. Main living area had a small kitchen, a table with bench seats, and a view screen showing the stars outside. Zara stood just inside the doorway, looking around nervously. "Sit down," Jake said, gesturing to the table. "Are you hungry? When's the last time you ate?" She perched on the edge of the bench like she was ready to run. I don't know. Yesterday. Maybe, but I don't need much food. It won't be expensive to keep." The way she said it broke Jake's heart. She was trying to sell herself as low maintenance, like a pet that wouldn't be too much trouble. "Listen to me carefully," Jake said, sitting across from her. "You're not my property. I don't own you. You're free." Zara's skin went completely white, a color Jake had never seen on a Catharian before. She started shaking her head frantically. "No. No. Please don't leave me here," she begged. "No, I'm not worth much, but I can work. I can clean. I can organize cargo. I can learn to be useful. Just don't abandon me on this station, please." Jake realized his mistake. Freedom wasn't a gift to someone who had nowhere to go and no one to turn to. Freedom was terrifying when you had been convinced you were worthless. "Okay," he said slowly. "How about this? You can work on my ship as crew. I'll pay you wages. Give you your own room and treat you like any other member of my team. But you're not a slave. You're an employee. There's a difference. You would pay me," she whispered, like the concept was impossible to grasp. "Of course, people should be paid for their work. But, but I'm defective. I can't do the things Catharians are supposed to do. What if I disappoint you?" Jake leaned forward, looking directly into her eyes. "Everyone has value, Zara. Maybe you just haven't found the right place to show yours yet." For the first time since he had met her, a small patch of gold appeared on her skin. It was tiny and flickered away quickly, but it was there. Hope, maybe, or the beginning of it. Over the next few hours, Jake showed her around the ship. The Starwing was a medium-sized cargo hauler designed for long trips between star systems. There was plenty of work to be done. Inventory management, system maintenance, navigation assistance, and general upkeep. Zara listened to everything with intense focus, like she was memorizing every word. When Jake showed her to the small guest cabin that would be her room, she stared at the bed like she had never seen one before. "This is ... mine?" she asked. "It's yours," Jake confirmed. "You can decorate it however you want. Keep your belongings. Here, have privacy when you need it." She sat on the edge of the bed and ran her hands over the clean sheets. Her skin flickered through several colors: confusion, wonder, disbelief, and something that might have been joy. "Why are you being kind? To me?" she asked suddenly. "What do you want in return?" The question caught Jake off guard. He thought about Amy, about all the people who had failed her, about the second chances that no one deserved to live without. "Maybe I just think everyone deserves to be treated with dignity," he said. "Maybe I think the universe has enough cruelty in it already." As they prepared to leave Station Omega-7, Jake filed the paperwork that would officially list Zara as a crew member rather than cargo. It was a small legal detail, but it meant everything. She was no longer property to be bought and sold. She was a person with rights and protections under galactic law. When the station fell away behind them and they entered hyperspace, Zara pressed her face to the viewport window. Her skin was cycling through colors Jake had never seen before. Blues and golds and silvers that seemed to dance across her features. "Are you okay?" he asked. She turned to him, and for the first time she smiled. It was a small, uncertain smile, but it was real. "I think," she said quietly, "I might be starting to remember what hope feels like," as the stars streaked past outside. Neither of them could have guessed that this was just the beginning of a journey that would change them both forever. Zara sat in the corner of the cold metal cage, her blue skin flickering with dull gray patches. On her home planet, her people called this the color of hopelessness. She had been displaying it for so long now that she wondered if it would ever change again. The voices outside her cage were getting louder. Two alien traders were arguing about what to do with her. She didn't need to understand their language perfectly to know they were discussing her fate. The angry gestures and frustrated clicks told her everything. "This one has been here for 3 months, growled Vex, a tall creature with 4 arms and snake-like skin. "Nobody wants her. She eats our food. takes up space, and brings us no profit. Partner, a shorter being with bulging eyes, nodded in agreement. The other Catherians we captured sold within days. Their color-changing abilities and mind-reading powers made them valuable servants. But this one? He pointed at Zara with disgust. Her colors are all wrong, and she can barely sense what anyone is thinking. Zara closed her eyes and tried to remember better times. She had grown up in a small village on Kith, surrounded by crystal trees that sang in the wind. Her family had a modest home near the singing fountains, and every evening they would gather to share stories while their skin glowed with warm, happy colors. But even then, she had been different. While her brother's skin would shine bright, gold when he was joyful, hers would flicker between gold and purple and sometimes even green. Her parents would look at her with worry, wondering why their daughter couldn't control her color changing like other children. Maybe she feels too much, her mother had whispered to her father one night, not knowing that Zara could hear them from the next room. Maybe she picks up everyone else's feelings and can't sort out her own. Her mother had been right, though none of them understood it at the time. Zara didn't just feel her own emotions. She felt everyone's emotions around her, all mixed up together, like colors bleeding into each other on wet paper. It was overwhelming and confusing, so she learned to shut it all out. But in doing so, she also shut out her own natural abilities. When the economic crash hit Kith, everything changed overnight. The crystal trees stopped singing, the fountains ran dry. Food became scarce, and families had to make impossible choices. The day the slave traders arrived, Zara's father had tears streaming down his face as his skin turned the deep purple of shame. "We have no choice," he had told her mother. "We need the credits to survive. Maybe they'll give her a better life than we can provide now." Zara had wanted to tell them it was okay, that she understood. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, her skin had turned completely gray, and it had stayed that way ever since. The traders had been excited at first. Catherians were known across the galaxy for their useful abilities. Rich families wanted them as companions who could sense their moods and respond accordingly. Business owners wanted them to read the emotions of potential customers. Even military groups found their empathic abilities valuable for interrogations and negotiations, but Zara had disappointed every potential buyer. When asked to demonstrate her color changing, her skin would flicker randomly through different shades, showing emotions that didn't match the situation. When tested for empathic abilities, she would stare blankly, unable to read even the most obvious emotional states. Defective, they called her. Broken, a waste of credits. Each rejection hurt more than the last. With every failed sale, her price dropped lower and lower. She went from being worth a small fortune to being valued less than a basic kitchen appliance. The traders moved her from the premium holding area to the standard section, then to the discount area, and finally to where she sat now in the section. Reserved for items they couldn't sell, Station Omega-7 was her last stop. It was a rough place on the edge of civilized space, where desperate people came to buy whatever they could afford. If nobody wanted her here, the traders had already decided what would happen next. Space was expensive on cargo ships and feeding. Unsold merchandise cut into profits. Zara had overheard them talking about it the night before. They would space her, push her out of an airlock into the cold vacuum of space. It was a common practice for items that couldn't be sold. Nobody asked questions, and there were no laws protecting beings like her on the outer rim. She should have been terrified, but instead, she felt strangely peaceful. Maybe it would be better this way. At least she wouldn't have to see the disappointment in anyone else's eyes when they realized how worthless she was. The sound of approaching footsteps made her look up. Vex was walking toward her cage with a security baton in one of his 4 hands. Behind him came his partner, carrying what looked like a spacesuit, the kind they gave to prisoners before spacing them. "Time to go, little failure," Vex said with a cruel smile. "We've wasted enough time and money on you." But before he could reach her cage, another voice called out from across the holding area. "Wait a minute. How much for that one?" All 3 of them turned to see a human male walking toward them. He was tall and lean, with dark hair, and tired. eyes that seemed to have seen too much of the galaxy's harsh realities. His clothes were simple, the kind worn by cargo haulers and freight runners who spent most of their time in space. Vex laughed, a sound like grinding metal. This one? Human? You don't want this piece of garbage. She's defective. Can't do anything a Catherian is supposed to do. The human stepped closer, and Zara felt something strange happen to her skin. For just a moment, a tiny spot of warm yellow appeared on her arm, the color of curiosity. She quickly covered it, afraid that this false hope would lead to another disappointment. She looks healthy enough, the human said, studying Zara with those tired eyes. What's wrong with her exactly? Everything. Vex's partner jumped in eagerly. Sensing a possible sale, her color changing is random and useless. Her empathic abilities are practically non-existent. She can't even follow simple commands properly. You've had her for months, and nobody wants her. The human nodded slowly, still looking at Zara. She found herself unable to look away from his eyes. Like the traders and potential buyers she had encountered, there was no disgust or calculation in his gaze. He looked at her like she was a person, not a piece of merchandise. How much? He asked again. Vex and his partner exchanged glances. They clearly wanted to get rid of her, but they also didn't want to seem too eager and scare off their only potential buyer in months. Well, Vex said slowly, normally a Catherian would cost several thousand credits, but given her ... issues, we could let her go for 500. The human raised an eyebrow. 500 for a defective slave? That seems high. Fine. 250. 100. And that's our final offer. The human reached into his jacket and pulled out a small credit chip. 20 credits. Take it or leave it. Zara's heart sank. 20 credits was less than the cost of a decent meal at any space station. It was the final confirmation that she truly was worth nothing. But to her surprise, the traders immediately agreed. They were so eager to get rid of her that they practically threw her cage open and shoved the ownership papers at the human. She's your problem now, Vex said with obvious relief.
Ass.
And don't come crying to us when you realize what a mistake you've made. As the human completed the transaction, Zara sat in stunned silence. She had been sold again, for the lowest price yet. But something was different about this buyer. When he looked at her, she didn't see the cold calculation she was used to. Instead, she saw something that confused her, something that made her skin flicker with the faintest hint of hope. Little did she know that this seemingly worthless transaction would change both of their lives forever. 3 weeks into their journey together, Zara was still waiting for Jake to show his true colors. In her experience, kindness was always temporary. People were nice when they wanted something, but eventually they would reveal what they really thought of her. Every morning, she woke up expecting to find herself locked in the cargo hold. Every meal, she expected Jake to tell her that food was too expensive to waste on someone like her. Every time he spoke to her, she braced herself for insults and disappointment, but it never came. Instead, Jake continued to treat her like she mattered. He asked her opinion about which routes to take, showed her how to operate the ship's navigation system. He even let her choose what music to play during their long stretches in hyperspace. The strangest part was how he reacted when she made mistakes, and she made plenty of them. The first big mistake happened during their second week together. Jake had asked her to organize the cargo hold while he handled some repairs in the engine room. Zara had been so eager to prove her worth that she worked for 12 hours straight, rearranging everything according to what she thought was the most logical system. When Jake came to check on her progress, it found chaos. She had mixed different types of cargo together, stacked heavy containers on top of fragile ones, and completely ignored the color-coded system that told him what belonged to which customer. Zara had stood there, skin flickering between gray and purple, waiting for the explosion of anger that never came. Jake had said, looking around at the mess. This is definitely ... creative. I'm sorry, Zara had whispered, already moving to fix everything. I'm so sorry. I thought I was helping, but I made it worse. I always make things worse. Hey! Jake's voice had been gentle but firm. Stop apologizing and help me understand. You're thinking, why did you organize it this way? The question had surprised her so much that she actually answered honestly. She explained how she had grouped things by size and weight, thinking it would be more efficient for loading and unloading. She had been trying to save Jake's time and effort, even though she had no real understanding of how cargo delivery worked. Instead of getting angry, Jake had listened to her explanation and then spent an hour teaching her about the real system. He showed her why certain items needed to be kept separate, how the color codes matched delivery schedules, and why weight distribution mattered for the ship's balance. "Your idea about grouping by weight wasn't completely wrong," he had said. "We do consider that, but we have to balance it with other factors too. Next time, ask questions before you start reorganizing everything, okay?" It was the first time in Zara's life that someone had treated her mistake as a learning opportunity, instead of proof of her worthlessness. The second major incident happened during their third week, and they stopped at a space station to refuel. Jake had gone to handle the paperwork, while Zara stayed with the ship. A group of rough-looking traders had approached her, asking questions about their cargo and destination. Zara, trying to be helpful and remembering how Jake always answered people's questions politely, had told them everything they wanted to know. She didn't realize she was giving away information that could be used to rob them or undercut their business deals. When Jake returned and learned what had happened, Zara had been sure this would be the end of her second chance. He had potentially cost him money and put them both in danger. Any reasonable person would space her for such a betrayal, but Jake hadn't gotten angry. He had looked tired and worried, but not angry. "Zara," he had said, "there are people out there who will try to take advantage of your kindness. You can't trust everyone who asks you questions, especially about our business." "I know," she had whispered. "I'm sorry. I thought being helpful was good. Being helpful is good. But being smart about who you help is even better." He had spent the rest of that day teaching her about station security, how to identify potential threats, and what information was safe to share with strangers. Treated it like job training, not punishment for being stupid. These experiences confused Zara more than any cruelty ever had. She didn't understand why Jake invested time and patience in teaching her instead of just getting rid of her. She kept waiting for the catch, for the moment when he would reveal what he really wanted from her. The answer came in an unexpected way. They were 3 days out from the Centauri system when their ship's sensors picked up a distress signal. Small passenger vessel was stranded in space, their engines dead and life support failing. "We have to help them," Jake had said immediately, changing course toward the distressed ship. "But we'll be late for our delivery," Zara had pointed out. "Won't that cost you money?" Jake had looked at her with surprise. "Some things are more important than money, Zara. People are dying out there." As they approached the passenger ship, Jake prepared to board and assess the situation. But when he tried to make radio contact, something strange happened. The people on the other ship seemed panicked in a way that went beyond their mechanical problems. They were arguing with each other, their voices rising in fear and frustration. "I can't understand what they're saying," Jake muttered, adjusting the communication settings. "Their translator must be broken too." That's when Zara felt it. The emotions coming from the other ship weren't just about engine failure. There was deeper fear there, old pain, trauma that had nothing to do with their current emergency. Without thinking, she placed her hand on the communication console. "They're scared of you," she said suddenly. Jake turned to her in surprise. "What? The people on that ship? They're not just afraid of dying, they're afraid of you, of humans." Zara's skin was cycling through colors she had never displayed before. Deep blues and purples mixed with flashes of red. "They think you might hurt them." "How do you know that?" Zara stared at the console, her hand still touching the metal surface. Information was flowing into her mind, emotions and thoughts that weren't her own. For the first time in years, her empathic abilities were working properly. "I can feel what they're feeling," she whispered. "They're refugees, running from something terrible, and they've learned not to trust anyone who offers help." Jake was quiet for a moment, processing this information, then he handed her the communication headset. "Can you talk to them? Let them know we're safe." What happened next amazed them both. When Zara spoke to the refugees, her voice carried something that went beyond words. Her natural empathic abilities, combined with her own experiences of fear and abandonment, allowed her to connect with them on a level Jake never could have achieved. She didn't just tell them they were safe. She made them feel it. Within minutes, the panicked voices on the other ship had calmed down. They accepted Jake's offer of help and allowed him to board their vessel. The rescue operation that could have taken hours was completed in less than 1. As they towed the refugee ship to the nearest station, Jake kept looking at Zara with something like amazement. "I've never seen anything like that," he said. "You didn't just communicate with them. You understood them in a way I never could." Zara was staring at her hands, still trying to process what had happened. "I don't understand. My abilities have never worked like that before. Everyone always said I was broken." "Maybe you weren't broken," Jake said thoughtfully. "Maybe you were just in the wrong environment, like a plant that can't grow in bad soil." That night, as they traveled toward the station, Zara sat in the observation lounge, watching the stars. Her skin was displaying colors she had never seen before. Warm golds and soft blues that seemed to glow from within. Jake found her there an hour later. "How are you feeling?" he asked, sitting down beside her. "Different," she said honestly. "For the first time in my life, I feel like maybe I'm not completely useless." "You were never useless, Zara. You just needed someone to see your real value." She turned to look at him, this human who had bought her for 20 credits and somehow given her back her sense of self-worth. "Why did you really buy me, Jake?" she asked. "And don't say it was just because you felt sorry for me. There's more to it than that." Jake was quiet for a long time, staring out at the stars. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft with old pain. "I had a sister once, Amy. She was killed in an attack on Mars colony when she was 19. Before she died, she had convinced herself that she was worthless, that everything bad that happened was her fault." He paused, his hands clenched in his lap. "I failed her. I couldn't make her see how valuable she was, how much she mattered. When I saw you in that cage, apologizing for existing, I saw Amy all over again. I couldn't save her, but maybe I could save you." Zara felt tears running down her face, and her skin glowed with warm pink, the color of gratitude mixed with deep sadness. "I'm sorry about your sister," she said quietly. "So am I. But you know what? Helping you has helped me, too. Amy would have loved seeing you discover your abilities today. She always believed everyone had something special to offer the universe." As they sat together in comfortable silence, both of them realized that their partnership had become something neither had expected. It wasn't just about one person saving another. They were saving each other one day at a time. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, for the first time in years, both of them felt like they had found their place in the universe. 6 months after leaving Station Omega-7, Jake and Zara had settled into a comfortable routine. Their cargo runs took them all across the galaxy, and word was starting to spread about the unusual human Catherian team who could handle difficult situations that other crews couldn't manage. Zara's abilities had grown stronger with each passing week. She could now sense emotions from incredible distances and help resolve conflicts that had seemed impossible to solve. Jake had started accepting contracts that specifically required diplomatic skills, and their success rate was becoming legendary. But their biggest test was waiting for them at New Geneva Station. New Geneva was one of the most important trading hubs in human space where dozens of different species came to do business. It was also where Dr. Lisa Rodriguez had her research facility, a place where she studied rare abilities and different alien species. Jake had cargo to deliver to Dr. Rodriguez, medical supplies for her research into cross-species communication. It was supposed to be a routine delivery, but nothing about that day would turn out to be routine. When they docked at New Geneva, Zara felt immediately overwhelmed. The station housed over 1 million beings from hundreds of different worlds, and their emotions hit her like a tsunami. Joy, anger, fear, excitement, loneliness, hope. It all crashed into her mind at once. "Are you okay?" Jake asked, noticing how her skin had gone completely white. "Too much," Zara whispered, pressing her hands to her temples. "Ash! Too many feelings. All at once." Jake helped her to a quiet corner of the docking bay where she could recover. Over the months, he had learned to recognize when her abilities became overwhelming. Usually, A few minutes of quiet and some deep breathing exercises would help her regain control. But today was different. As Zara tried to center herself, she became aware of something that made her blood run cold. Somewhere in the mass of emotions surrounding them, she sensed something familiar and terrifying. Catherian minds. Not just one or two, but several, and they were actively searching for something. For someone, Jake, she said urgently, grabbing his arm. We need to leave now. What's wrong? They're here. The bounty hunters from my home planet, they're looking for me. Jake's face went hard. Over the past 6 months, he had heard stories about Catherian bounty hunters who tracked down escaped slaves and returned them to their original owners. It was legal under certain interpretations of galactic law, even though it was morally wrong. How many? He asked. 3, maybe 4? They're spread out across the station, but they're definitely hunting, Jake thought quickly. They could try to run, but their ship was still being refueled and wouldn't be ready for departure for another hour. They could hide, but Zara's emotional signature would eventually give them away to other Catherians. Come on, he said, helping her to her feet. We're going to deliver this cargo as planned. Dr. Rodriguez might be able to help us. Dr. Rodriguez's laboratory was located in the research section of New Geneva Station. When Jake and Zara arrived, with the medical supplies, they found a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and an immediately welcoming demeanor. You must be Captain Chen, she said, shaking Jake's hand. And you must be Zara. I've heard some fascinating reports about your work. Together. Zara looked surprised. You've heard about us? Oh, yes. Word travels fast in research circles when someone displays unusual abilities. The refugee situation you handled near Centauri 3 made quite an impression on the diplomatic community. Rodriguez led them into her main laboratory, which was filled with advanced equipment that Zara didn't recognize. On the walls were charts and diagrams showing different alien brain structures and neural pathways. I study empathic and telepathic abilities across species, Dr. Rodriguez explained. Your case is particularly interesting because your abilities seem to have developed in a way that goes far beyond typical Catherian parameters. As they talked, Dr. Rodriguez conducted some basic tests with Zara's permission. She measured Zara's ability to sense emotions at various distances, her capacity to project calming feelings to others, and her skill at interpreting complex emotional states. The results were remarkable. Zara, Dr. Rodriguez said, looking at her equipment readings in amazement. You're not defective. You're evolved. Your empathic range is nearly 10 times stronger than the average Catherian. And your ability to influence others' emotional states is completely off the charts. But my color changing is all wrong, Zara protested. And for most of my life, I couldn't sense anything at all. That's because you were unconsciously protecting yourself, Dr. Rodriguez explained. When empathic abilities are this strong, the mind often shuts them down to prevent overwhelming. It's like closing your eyes when a light is too bright. She turned to Jake. With proper training, Zara could become one of the most effective diplomatic mediators in the galaxy. Her abilities could prevent wars, resolve trade disputes, even help with psychological healing. Then Dr. Rodriguez made an offer that changed everything. I'd like Zara to stay here and work with my research team. We could help her develop her abilities properly, and she could assist us in developing new techniques for interspecies communication. The compensation would be substantial, and the work could benefit millions of people across the galaxy. Gate felt his heart sink. He had known this day would come eventually. Zara was too talented, too valuable, to spend her life running cargo routes with him. But the thought of losing her felt like losing Amy all over again. Zara looked between Jake and Dr. Rodriguez, her skin cycling through confused colors. For the first time in months, she felt truly uncertain about what she wanted. Before anyone could respond, alarms started blaring throughout the station. Security announcements echoed through the corridors, warning of unauthorized armed individuals in the research section. The bounty hunter, Zara whispered. Through the laboratory's windows, they could see 3 tall figures in dark clothing moving through the corridors. They wore the traditional masks of Catherian law enforcement, but their movements were predatory. Not official. Is there another way out? Jake asked Dr. Rodriguez. The emergency tunnels, but they'll be watching those too. That's when Zara made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. "I'm going to face them," she said. "Absolutely not," Jake said immediately. "We'll find another way." "No, Jake. I'm tired of running. I'm tired of being afraid." Zara's skin was glowing with determination, a color Jake had never seen before. "For the first time in my life, I know my worth. I'm not going to let them take that away from me." The confrontation took place in the station's main plaza with hundreds of witnesses from dozens of different species. The bounty hunters claimed that Zara was stolen property, that her original purchase had been illegal, and that she needed to be returned to her home planet for proper processing. But something unexpected happened. As the legal arguments flew back and forth, other beings in the plaza began to speak up. A Centauri diplomat stepped forward to testify about how Zara had prevented a war between two colony worlds. A group of refugees shared stories about how she had helped them find peace after terrible traumas. Even some of the traders from their cargo runs came forward, talking about how Zara had helped resolve disputes and prevented violence in situations where normal negotiation had failed. "This being is not property," declared the Centauri diplomat. "She is a sentient individual who has used her gifts to serve others. To treat her as merchandise would be a violation of every principle of civilization." The station's legal arbitrator, a wise old Vulcan named Magistrate Stern, listened to all the testimony before making his ruling. He declared that Zara's consistent treatment as a free individual, combined with the testimony of those she had helped, constituted legal emancipation under the Galactic Rights Charter. But more importantly, he recognized her as a being of unique value to galactic society. "Rarely have I seen an individual whose personal growth has contributed so significantly to the welfare of others," Magistrate Stern declared. "Miss Zara is not only free, but she is officially recognized as a galactic citizen with full rights and protections." As the bounty hunters left in defeat and the crowd began to disperse, Zara found herself facing the most difficult decision of her life. Dr. Rodriguez's offer was still on the table, representing a chance to develop her abilities and help millions of people. But it would mean leaving Jake, the person who had first seen her value when everyone else saw only failure. "You should take the offer," Jake said quietly. "This is your chance to do something really important." Zara looked at him, this human who had bought her for 20 credits and given her back her sense of self-worth. "What if I don't want to choose?" she asked. "What if there's a third option?" Her skin was glowing with a new color, the brilliant gold of inspiration mixed with the warm pink of affection. She had an idea, and it was going to change everything for both of them. Zara's third option turned out to be better than anyone could have imagined. Instead of choosing between staying with Jake or working with Dr. Rodriguez, she proposed something entirely different. What if they could combine both opportunities? What if Jake's cargo business could become something more than just hauling freight across the galaxy? "Think about it," Zara said, her excitement making her skin glow with brilliant colors. "We've already been doing diplomatic work without realizing it. Every time we've helped resolve conflicts or assisted refugees, we've been making the galaxy a little bit more peaceful." Dr. Rodriguez was immediately interested. "You're talking about creating a mobile diplomatic service?" "Exactly. Jake knows the galaxy better than almost anyone. He has contacts on hundreds of worlds, and people trust him. I have abilities that can help resolve conflicts that traditional diplomats can't handle. Together, we could go where we're needed most." Jake felt a mix of excitement and uncertainty. The idea was appealing, but it would mean completely changing his life. For years, he had been content to live quietly, avoiding complicated relationships and emotional attachments. But Zara had already changed that. Whether he was ready or not, it would be dangerous work, he pointed out. Diplomatic missions can turn violent quickly, more dangerous than ignoring conflicts until they explode into wars, Zara asked. "It's more dangerous than letting people suffer because nobody wants to get involved." Dr. Rodriguez offered to provide training, equipment, and official backing through her research institute. The Galactic Council had been looking for new approaches to conflict resolution, especially methods that could bridge the communication gaps between different species. "You'd essentially be freelance peacekeepers," she explained, "going to places where traditional diplomacy has failed, using Zara's abilities to find solutions that nobody else can see. The first test of their new partnership came sooner than expected, 3 days after the legal hearing. They received an emergency call from the mining colony on Kepler-7. 2 different species had been sharing the planet peacefully for decades, but a recent discovery of rare minerals had led to territorial disputes that were rapidly escalating toward violence. The colonial government was desperate. Traditional mediators had failed, and both sides were preparing for war. The economic importance of the mining operations meant that the Galactic Council couldn't simply let the conflict burn itself out. Jake and Zara arrived on Kepler-7 to find a planet on the edge of chaos. The Terran colonists who had been there first claimed rights to the new mineral deposits based on their original settlement contracts. The Andorian mining clans, who had joined the colony later, but provided most of the technical expertise, argued that they deserved equal access to resources they had helped discover. Both sides had valid points, but years of minor disagreements had built up into massive walls of resentment and mistrust. This is exactly the kind of situation where traditional diplomacy fails, Zara observed as they toured the colony. Both sides have stopped listening to each other. They're so focused on their own grievances that they can't see the other side's perspective. Jake nodded, watching the tension in the streets. Terran and Andorian families who had been neighbors for years were now crossing to the opposite side of the road to avoid each other. Children who had played together were being kept apart by their parents. So how do we fix it? He asked. Zara's answer surprised him. We don't fix it. We help them fix it themselves. What followed was the most challenging week of their partnership so far. Instead of sitting both sides down for formal negotiations, Zara used her abilities to identify the root, emotional issues beneath the surface conflict. She discovered that the Terran colonists weren't really angry about mining rights. They were afraid of being displaced, of losing the home they had built over decades of hard work. Dorians weren't really angry about resource access. They were hurt by what they saw as lack of recognition for their contributions to the colony's success. Fear and hurt. Emotions that had nothing to do with mineral deposits or legal contracts. Working together, Jake and Zara developed a new approach. Instead of arguing about who deserved what, they helped both communities remember why they had chosen to live together in the first place. Jake organized practical working groups to address immediate concerns about resource distribution and profit sharing. Zara used her abilities to facilitate emotional healing, helping people express fears and hurts that had been building up for years. The breakthrough came when a Terran child fell into an abandoned mining shaft. Without hesitation, Andorian rescue teams worked through the night to save her. Using their technical expertise and risking their own safety, her Terran parents thanked the Andorian rescuers with tears in their eyes. "This is who we really are," Zara said to the gathered crowd. "This is what matters, not who is here first or who deserves what, but how we take care of each other when it really counts." The formal agreements that followed were almost secondary. 2. The emotional reconciliation. Both communities established a joint council for resource management, with profits shared based on contribution rather than species. More importantly, they created new traditions and celebrations that honored both cultures equally. When Jake and Zara left Kepler-7 2 weeks later, the colony was more united than it had been in years. We actually did it, Jake said, as their ship entered hyperspace. We prevented a war. Zara was glowing with soft, happy colors. We helped them prevent their own war. There's a difference. Over the following months, their reputation grew. They mediated trade disputes between merchant families, resolved territorial conflicts between nomadic species, and even helped negotiate peace treaties between planets that had been fighting. For generations, each mission taught them something new about their partnership. Jake learned that his practical problem-solving skills were just as valuable as Zara's empathic abilities. Zara learned that emotional healing was meaningless without concrete solutions to real problems. But most importantly, they both learned that their individual strengths became something more powerful when combined with genuine friendship and trust. 1 year after leaving Station Omega-7, they returned to visit Dr. Rodriguez and report on their progress. The researcher was amazed by how much both of them had grown. "Zara, your abilities have developed far beyond what I thought possible," she said, reviewing the data from their latest missions. "But more than that, you've learned to use them in ways that actually solve problems, instead of just understanding them." She turned to Jake. "And you've transformed from a cargo hauler who avoided complications into one of the most effective diplomatic facilitators in the galaxy." "We've had a good teacher," Jake said, smiling at Zara. "We've taught each other," Zara corrected. "It's what real partnerships do." As they prepared to leave for their next mission, Dr. Rodriguez asked them the same question that reporters and government officials had been asking for months. "What's your secret? How do you succeed where so many others fail?" Jake and Zara looked at each other, sharing one of those silent moments of understanding that had become common between them. "I think," Zara said finally, "it's because we both know what it feels like to be seen as worthless. When you've been thrown away by society, you develop a different perspective on what really matters. We don't see conflicts as problems to be solved," Jake added. "We see them as people who need to remember their own worth and the worth of others." "Everyone has value," Zara continued. "Sometimes they just need help remembering what that value is." As their ship pulled away from New Geneva Station, heading toward their next assignment, both of them reflected on how much their lives had changed. Jake was no longer a lonely cargo hauler running from emotional connections. Zara was no longer a frightened girl who believed she was worthless. But the most important change was that they had both learned the truth about value and worth. It wasn't something that could be bought or sold, measured or weighed. Its true worth came from the connections we make, the kindness we show, and the positive impact we have on others' lives. "You know what's funny?" Zara said as they watched the stars streak past outside their viewport. "What's that? You bought me for 20 credits? The least expensive purchase you ever made?" Jake smiled. "And the most valuable." Zara's skin glowed with warm golden light, the color of deep contentment and joy. For both of us, as they traveled toward their next mission, neither of them could have predicted that their story would inspire others across the galaxy. Beings who had been told they were worthless began to believe in their own value. People who had given up on making connections started reaching out to others, the ripple effects of one. Humans' decision to see worth where others saw only failure would spread farther than either of them could imagine. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the biggest changes in the universe. Sometimes 20 credits can buy something priceless, and sometimes when you help someone else discover their worth, you discover your own in the process.